Alright, what we're going to do is we're going to make a color wheel, and I'm going to make a 3-leveled color wheel, one that I find very useful. And I like to think of the color wheel as a primitive kind of computer. So you get your center point and you draw possibly an inner circle, right? You then decide on your vertical, and so you draw in a vertical at 90 degrees. This circle you need to divide into 3 equal parts, and it's quite easy to do that. Could use a protractor, but I like to do everything in a plastic manner, which means a physical manner. So if we divide our triangle like that, we will now have 120 degrees, which would result in 3 equal parts. And there we have our inner circle. We can first design the whole structure. We want an area equivalent to that area as our second layer, so this can't be too thick or too thin. So we look at it visually, and I would say that's a little bit thin. Just take a test. Maybe just about there. And we draw our circle, second circle, the second layer, and then we draw our third layer, which will be slightly thinner than the second layer, just to make it look visually in proportion. Oops, my compass moved there, that's often a problem. It's also easy to get your compass right by turning the paper. That also solves many issues. Right, and there we have our 3 tiered color wheel, and project that line on. Project this line on here. I'm just doing it very slowly. There's a faster way of doing this. I'll project that one there, so that'll give us those. Then we take the back one of each and project it adjacent to its original line. And there we have the color wheel structure set out. In the middle here would be the primaries. In the second circle you would have your secondary colors, and in the third circle you'll have your tertiary colors. Right, so the first thing is to try and work out what the primary color is. Now there's 2 different types of primaries. So while I'm working, I'll explain those to you. The first one is the primaries of pigments, and the second one is the primaries of light. Although ultimately, if you had the perfect primary pigment colors, both light and pigment colors would be the same. So the primary colors in pigment are red, blue, and yellow. But if you were using light and mixing light to make white light, you would use green, red, and blue. And so that's the 2 different primaries. So if you're looking at primary colors in light, in science you will find that they are different to those in pigment. With these 3 primary colors, why they're called the primaries is that you can make any other color from these 3 colors. And so they're like the most powerful colors that one can use in art. And so it's always important to remember that and to use that in your artworks. These are going to be 3. Notice that I always draw up to the line. I don't draw with the back of my pencil crayon. And I try and make it as flat as possible, because this is more like a design exercise. It's not an art exercise. It's more just a design exercise where we're trying to understand color. So there we have our first primary color, and move on to our second one, which is red. The quality of your pencil crayons will determine how great your drawing is. This red is a deep red, in fact a cold red. So our color wheel is going to look a little bit strange. It's not a perfect hue of red. The perfect hue of red would be a cadmium red. But unfortunately this pencil crayon set doesn't have it, and obviously the cheaper the set, the less likely you're going to get true colors. And that obviously makes it harder for you when you're working on a very high level and trying to get a specific color. But we'll use this one, since my other red looks a bit too orangey. It's too much cadmium in it. Cadmium red is quite an orangey kind of red. It's just too much. Right, notice how we draw up to the line, and therefore we don't ever go outside the lines. We don't make hard outlines. That would be incorrect. Each color just separates each other, one color to the next. And there we have our red, and here we have the hue of yellow. And we put that in. Yellow is one of the colors that actually advances closest to the eye, or has the illusion of advancing closest to the eye. So it's a very bright, strong, intense color. And so one can use color to create space as well. But at the moment we just aiming at creating a very flat design. And as I say, keep turning your page so that you're always working 90 degrees, and then you will never go out the line, even when you're painting. So if this was a brush, I would be doing exactly the same thing. Working up to the line, using hatching to make it as flat as possible. And there we have the three primary colors: red, blue and yellow. These are the pigment primaries. And now we're going to move on to the secondaries and try and understand the computer as we look at it. So it doesn't matter where you put these three, but what matters is the next step. What we're looking at is what these two colors, if mixed together, what would they create here, which is your secondary colors. What would these two colors make, and what would these two colors make? And that's where you would put them. That's why this is quite a beautiful primitive computer. And so if we took red and yellow, we would get a beautiful orange. And at the moment I'm not mixing them on the paper because I already have a mixed sample in the pencil crayon itself. So I'm going to use that one. So obviously it's not going to be the perfect hue either. As I said, our red was a little bit of a cool red, and so it wasn't a perfect hued red either. And I'm doing this quite quickly, but one could spend a lot more time trying to keep the values the same of each color, as well as making them as flat as possible so that there's no pencil crayon marks, because it is a design exercise. And there we have our orange. And now we're going to move on to the next one. So the next one we're going to figure out is what color does yellow and blue make? And put them together, we get green. And obviously if you've got more yellow, you're going to get a more yellowy green. So once again, working right up to the line. 90 degrees to the line with the pencil, not using the back of your pencil to try and color that side. One can now shade in perfectly your drawings. As I said, it gives you control by always using the front of your brush or pencil crayon or pencil or any device that you're using, object, to make marks or mark making object. And one's just got to always remember not to be lazy and to forget to turn the page, to keep it at 90 degrees. As you can see, I'm slowly working around, and now I'm going to work my way back. And as I said, I'm only doing one layer for this video of color. I could go back after this and do a second layer and make my hues perfectly flat for each of the layers. And obviously this can be done in paint. If I had done this in paint, I would have only used red, blue and yellow and mixed my green, and that would be 50% blue and 50% yellow to get the perfect hue of green. If you mix a little bit more of either, the color changes. Right, so there we have our green. And the difficult one in pencil crayon obviously is the purple, because they don't always give you a really true purple, but this one looks alright as a purple. So I'm just waiting for the point to soften a bit, because the point is very sharp and I don't need such a sharp point on this drawing, so I can get it to lessen down a bit. Now it's getting nice and blunt, and if it gets blunt, obviously your mark is softer and therefore you can cover a large area quicker than a sharp one. It's too sharp. But obviously sometimes in drawing you would want a very sharp one as well. So red and blue makes purple. And we now have the 6 main sort of colors. Alright, so what we've got now is we've got the primary colors, the secondary colors, and now we're going to start the tertiary colors. The way the computer works is if you take these two, where they're pointing is the color that they create. So if you mix those two in equal proportions, they create purple. If you mix red and yellow in equal proportions, they create a pure orange. And the hue is what's important, is that it's a pure hue. Obviously if you mix more yellow than red in unequal proportions, your secondary color will change and it won't be a pure hue. And if you mix yellow and blue, you're going to get green. Now, what most people don't realize, and I'm sure some of you would know this color wheel by now, but is that if we move to the next level, which is the tertiary level, we need to look at how that system works. So now we take our secondaries. So over here, these two colors, if they mix together, they're going to make this color. And this color, because it is going to have mathematically 2 reds, because orange and purple have red in them, 1 yellow and 1 blue. So it's 2 reds, 1 yellow and 1 blue will make a red brown. So now we're going to try and mix it with the pencil crayons. Obviously it's not going to be as perfect as if we were mixing it in paint, but let's hope we get something quite close. And obviously we understand the principle of 2 parts red, 1 part yellow, 1 part blue will give us a red brown, and the red brown is called russet. And so that's the first important point. You need to make a note and understand that a red brown is called russet. So any brown that has a majority of red in it is a russet brown. Obviously we're trying to make the pure hued russet, but that's very difficult unless you had paint. So we take our purple, which is made up of red and blue, and we now mix it in with the orange in equal proportions, and hopefully we will come up with a red brown. It's quite difficult with pencil crayon. You need to go over and over your surfaces until you get a reddish kind of brown. My orange is a little bit too yellowy, so I might have to add the red by hand. To get that reddish brown look. So the main thing is you need to understand it's made up of red and blue, and this is orange is made up of yellow and red. It's 2 reds, 1 yellow, 1 blue, making russet. Okay, and there we have it, and as I predicted, it's not reddish enough, so now I'm going to have to add the red by hand, and now it's coming out quite beautifully. And I can even add a bit of blue by hand as well, because this is just to get this russet color. And there we're getting a beautiful russet color. Alright, so it's important that you understand that concept. And once again, shading, I'm using the front of my pencil to shade. I like my pencil crayon to be a little bit blunt on one side, and you can see now how the red russet is working. It's come to life. Right, so that's the russet, and that's the tertiary russet brown, and it's fantastic, and hopefully you're going to see it all over. Now we're going to move to the next one. Now this one is opposite the yellow. So the red one is opposite the red. That makes russet a red brown. Obviously now this one is going to be a yellow brown. Reason being is because orange and green is made up of a yellow each plus blue and red. So orange is red and yellow, and blue and green is blue and yellow. So it's 2 yellows plus 1 orange, sorry, my mistake, 1 red and 1 blue. The important point here is it's 2 times the quantity of yellow compared to blue and red, and those get added in equal proportions. So it's just like pure science. Once again here we got a little bit careful because the yellow is very soft, and so I will need to come with pencil crayon and break it over. If we were using pigment, I could just scoop out the colors with, say, a teaspoon, and I would have the perfect quantities mixed together. But with pencil crayon it doesn't always work like that. So this now is a yellow brown. It's two yellows, 1 blue, 1 red. And the thing about the yellow brown is it's called olive. Right. So far our first red brown is russet, and yellow brown is olive. And I've given away what a blue brown is going to be, didn't I? Okay, that's coming up. So here I'm slowly mixing this up, and once again, in this case our green is not a perfect hue of green. It's more of a blue-green, so I'm going to have to pump up the yellow, although it seems to look quite good without the extra yellow. It seems to be looking like a very, very nice olive, but I'm going to just see if I need to add a little bit of yellow, just because of the the green is not a perfect hue of green. But yeah, that's a pretty good olive. And there we have the olive. So now we move to our last tertiary color. And obviously here we're going to mix these two colors together. So now, by now, mathematically, you should have worked out what this is. The color is going to be, if we look here as the clue, that's 2 blues plus red and yellow. Okay, so green is made up of blue and yellow, and purple is made up of red and blue. So there you see the 2 blues, red and yellow. Notice the tertiaries are made up of all 3 colors, hence they're called the tertiaries. It's just the quantities, you know, so we're not talking about just a single brown anymore. I think that's what one learns right in the beginning when one's learning art. You know, you mix all the colors together and you get brown. No, you don't just get brown, you get a specific hue of brown. If you've put more red into your mix, it's going to be a russet brown. If you've put a more yellow into the mix, it's going to be a more olive brown. If you put more blue into the mix, it's going to be a citron brown. So you need to learn those 3 types of browns. Unfortunately, they're not widely known and used, and I think it's important that those colors are used in this because they're some of the most powerful colors in art. If you look at any 18th, 19th century art, they are used extensively. It's only in the 20th century those colors weren't really used as much. Alright, and now we're coming to our citron brown, which we now know is going to be a blue brown because it's got 2 blues. And as I said, that's the perfect mix. But one will find in nature there's variations, thousands, millions, hundreds of thousands of variations of the different hues of these colors depending on how much we mix into each one. And that's why it's very difficult to copy a color unless you know the quantities of what the artist did and how they mixed them together. And that's what makes forgers very good, is they understand the quantities of how it was mixed. They use the same materials. So if I was working in paint, the colors would be slightly different to the pentachrome, because I could obviously, if I was in oil paint, I could get the perfect hues and mix them together in the perfect quantities, just using a scientific method of mixing, a mathematical method of mixing the colors together. Notice always 90 degrees the line, and there we have our perfect 3-tier color wheel. I could spend time getting rid of all these little marks. That's going to take a bit of time, and as a second layer I should go over the whole color wheel again with every single color until it is perfectly flat. There are no mistakes and it would look just absolutely beautiful as a design. But due to the confines of time, we're not going to do that. So I just want to finish off by just reminding you about how the color wheel computer works. So here we have the primaries, the secondaries, and the tertiaries. If you take any of these 2 colors and mix them together, you will get what happens in the secondary level, opposite to it. Now, the big thing is, so it's quite easy. Yellow and blue make green, yellow and red make orange, orange and blue make purple. Then if we take orange and purple, we get citron, which is a red brown. If we take orange and green, we get olive, which is a yellow brown. And if we take green and purple, we get citron, which is a blue brown. Now, if we look at the opposite, where this thing is pointing, and we skip across to this side, we get what is called the complementary color. And the complementary color is the opposite color. And if you put these 2 colors together and they're perfect hues, they vibrate. They don't sit comfortably together, so artists are very scared to use them close together if they of exactly the same hue. So the opposite of red is green, which is a complementary color. The opposite of yellow is purple, which is a complementary color. The opposite of blue is orange, which is complementary. So you'll notice always a primary has a secondary opposite to it, and a secondary always has a primary opposite to it. Okay, so this little computer I think is really handy. It's something that you need to memorize and have in your head at all times when you're looking at color, and it definitely would help your understanding of color. Okay, thank you.